Story 1. The Bathroom Lockdown. I never thought I'd find myself huddled in a bathroom stall with Cindy Prescott, the girl who made my life a living nightmare. I was a socially awkward sophomore. She was a pretty and popular junior, and she never let me forget it. I could still hear her sharp laugh echoing in my head as I stared at my reflection in the grimy mirror, wiping away the mascara that had run down my cheeks. I was just trying to gather my thoughts after an especially brutal lunch when I heard the door swing open. "What is this, the loser's lounge?" Cindy sneered, strutting in. She was vicious, even without her usual entourage to show off for. My heart raced. I forced myself to look down, pretending to be busy with my phone, but I felt her presence like a shadow creeping up my spine. "Ah, is the little art freak crying again?" she taunted, and I could feel my cheeks burn. I wanted to tell her to leave me alone, but the words got stuck in my throat. Just as I was about to muster the courage, an alarm blared, and the loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention students, a lockdown has been initiated. This is not a drill." Cindy and I exchanged a quick, terrified glance. "What does that mean?" she whispered, her bravado instantly faltering. "I don't know," I said, the dread pooling in my stomach. My heart thumped louder as the sound of metal doors clanging shut echoed in the hallway. "Let's see what's going on," Cindy said, moving toward the door. I followed her, curiosity battling my fear. We peeked into the hallway and my stomach dropped. At the end of the corridor stood a figure dressed entirely in black, his back turned to us. "Who is that?" I whispered, panic creeping into my voice. Cindy didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed my arm and yanked me back into the bathroom, quietly shutting the door behind us. "What the hell is happening?" she asked in a whisper. I had never seen Cindy scared. "I think—" But before I could finish, a loud bang echoed through the building, making both of us jump. It sounded like a gunshot. Cindy's face paled as tears streamed down her cheeks. I can't," she sobbed, crumbling to the floor. "Shh, it's okay. Just breathe," I said, kneeling next to her, even though my heart was racing. The classroom doors locked from the inside, but not the bathroom. I gently took her shoulder and guided her to one of the stalls. "Come on, we need to hide." We squeezed into the stall and I put my hand over her mouth, shushing her softly. "It's going to be okay, just stay quiet." I could feel her trembling against me as we heard faint footsteps approaching. "Keep your feet up," I said. Trembling, I moved to the next stall over, my heart thundering in my chest. I quickly lifted my feet off the ground, praying we wouldn't be seen. The footsteps grew closer, and the door creaked open. I held my breath, trying to remain silent as black boots crossed my line of sight. "Please go away," I thought, squeezing my eyes shut as I heard the figure pause just outside the stall. The intruder seemed to glance around before stepping back into the hallway and closing the door behind them. I let out a shaky breath, but it was quickly replaced by another sob from Cindy. "Why is this happening?" she cried, and I felt the weight of her fear pressing down on me. I couldn't just leave her alone like this. Plus, I didn't want her cries to draw the intruder back. I slid underneath the stall wall and into her space, wrapping my arms around her tightly. "We'll be okay," I whispered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Just hold on." We stayed like that in each other's arms, hugging and crying for what felt like hours. I couldn't believe that the girl who'd made my life hell was now my only ally in this nightmare. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the loudspeaker crackled again. "The lockdown has been lifted. Please remain calm and follow emergency procedures." Cindy and I pulled apart, still shaken but relieved. We emerged from the stall and the bathroom was eerily quiet. There were no signs of the intruder anymore. We exchanged a look and nodded, silently agreeing to leave together. When we stepped into the hallway, the world outside felt strange and surreal. Students were milling about, some crying, some hugging. The chaos had transformed into a strange camaraderie, a sense of relief washing over us all. Over the next few days, we learned what had happened. The intruder was our art teacher, Ms. Jameson's estranged husband. A day earlier, she served him with divorce papers and he snapped. Luckily, the gunshot we heard was him shooting a painting when he found her classroom empty. No one was hurt, but the threat had felt all too real. The remainder of the school year changed. People were kinder, more considerate, aware of how fragile life could be. I found a newfound strength within myself, even if I wasn't sure how long it would last. When the next school year rolled around, old cliques began to reform. I passed Cindy and her group one day, and one of her friends made a snide comment about my clothes. My heart sank, expecting the familiar sting of ridicule. "Knock it off," Cindy said, not looking at me. "She's okay." I blinked in disbelief. It wasn't friendship, not by a long shot, but it was enough to stop the bullying. All it took was an unhinged gunman. Story 2. The Reality in His Head. I was sitting in third period history trying to focus on a lecture about World War II when the fire alarm blared, shattering the monotony of another high school day. The principal's voice boomed over the PA system. "We are now in lockdown. Remain in your classrooms and await further instructions." 3 loud beeps echoed through the halls, an ominous signal that this was not a drill. Mr. Griffin, our teacher, and the assistant wrestling coach locked the door with a steady hand. "Everyone move toward the back of the room and stay calm," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. A few kids were clearly more rattled than the rest. One in particular stood out. Aaron. I didn't know him well. We had different, although similarly small, groups of friends. His face was pale and he looked like he was about to puke. As the minutes dragged on, Aaron's anxiety escalated. Suddenly he stood and began to pace. "Aaron, I need you to stay in your seat, buddy," Mr. Griffin said, his voice calm but firm. Aaron glanced up, startled, as if he didn't realize he was standing. He sank back down, but his leg began to bounce uncontrollably. Sweat glistened on his forehead. I leaned closer. "Aaron, are you okay, man?" He flinched at my voice, shaking his head violently. "I can't be here," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. From the hallway we heard footsteps and muffled voices. Mr. Griffin chanced a quick look through the glass and breathed a sigh of relief. "It's the police," he told us. "Everyone sit tight and this will all be over soon." "No," Aaron said, banging his fist on his desk. "What's that, Aaron?" Mr. Griffin asked, eyeing him. Aaron looked up, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with terror. "I can't be here," he said again, his voice rising with panic. "It's okay, Aaron," Mr. Griffin tried to reassure him. "It'll be over soon." But Aaron wasn't listening. He leapt to his feet, knocking his desk aside. "I can't be here. I have to go. I have to go now." One of the girls, who'd already been on the verge of tears, broke down, sobbing loudly. A few classmates rushed to comfort her while others attempted to calm Aaron. But it was no use. I watched in silence, my heart racing. Aaron looked completely unhinged. "Please, Aaron, sit down," Mr. Griffin repeated, his voice steady. "Everything is going to be okay." "No, it's not," Aaron screamed, his face twisted in anguish. "This wasn't supposed to happen." He bolted for the door, but Mr. Griffin blocked his path, towering over him. Aaron pushed against Mr. Griffin, but he was just a gangly 16-year-old, while Mr. Griffin was a former college wrestler. He subdued Aaron gently but firmly, trying to keep him calm. Aaron screamed, "Let go of me, I can't be here, this is all wrong." Then came a loud knock on the door. A voice called out from the hallway, "This is the police." A classmate opened the door, and officers flooded in, quickly taking control of Aaron. His screams turned to sobs as they handcuffed him and dragged him out of the classroom. We all sat there, stunned into silence. The lockdown was lifted soon after, and we were sent home. I met up with my friends, and I recounted the bizarre and terrifying scene. Initially, we felt sympathy for Aaron. We thought maybe he just had a panic attack. But the next day, we learned the truth. Aaron had always been a quiet kid who stuck to his tight-knit group of friends, gaming and watching anime. Finally, he'd found the courage to ask Jenny Webster to prom. She was sweet and pretty, the kind of girl everyone liked. What Aaron didn't know was that she'd already said yes to someone else, a football player named Tom. Convinced that Tom and his friends were laughing at him, Aaron spiraled into a delusion that he had no choice but to take matters into his own hands. That morning, he took his stepfather's gun from the closet and brought it to school. He had gym class with Jenny and Tom later that day, and planned to ensure that one or both of them wouldn't make it to prom. But one of Aaron's friends, worried about his increasingly erratic behavior, went to the principal after homeroom. During the lockdown, the police searched Aaron's locker and found a loaded 9mm Glock. The saddest part? Tom never even knew Aaron had asked Jenny. She hadn't told anyone because she felt bad about saying no. She had no desire to embarrass him. Nobody was laughing at Aaron. Nobody was making fun of him. But in Aaron's mind, a twisted narrative had taken shape, a reality where murder seemed like the only solution. That day I learned how fragile our minds can be, how one moment of desperation can lead to devastating consequences. Aaron had built an entire alternate reality where his fears and anger led him to the unthinkable. And as we returned to our normal lives, I couldn't help but wonder who the next person to unravel would be. Story 3. The Stranger. I had never been much of a morning person, and I was running late as usual. I gulped down some orange juice and hurried out the door. The sun cast a warm glow as I walked to school. I lived in a small, safe town. Even as a 15-year-old girl, I had never worried about walking alone. That fateful Tuesday in October felt like any other day, until I spotted him. He was standing on the side of the road next to a beat-up sedan with the hood up. The moment our eyes met, a chill ran down my spine. "Good morning," I said as I walked by, trying to hide my discomfort. He just stared at me. Something about his gaze was unsettling, like he was sizing me up. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the eerie feeling of being watched. When I reached the next corner, I glanced back. He was still standing there, staring at me. With a shudder, I hurried along to school. I checked over my shoulder a few more times, but didn't see him again. I tried to push thoughts of the stranger out of my mind as I took my seat next to my best friend Melissa in homeroom. The school day started normally enough. At least until second period, when the principal's voice spoke over the intercom, sounding tense. "Attention students, we are going into lockdown. Please stay in your classrooms and keep the doors locked." For 30 long minutes, we sat in silence, my heart racing as I thought about that strange guy from the morning. My mind spiraled, wondering if there was a connection, but the lockdown was lifted eventually, and the school day continued as if nothing had happened. I tried to shake the feeling, but unease clung to me. The school didn't provide an official explanation for the lockdown, but rumors began to swirl. A girl in my chemistry class, whose dad was on the school board, said an unknown man had attempted to force his way in through a locked side door. The school's security officer had chased him off. My stomach turned. Could it be just a coincidence? Should I tell someone about the man from that morning? As the final bell rang, I breathed a sigh of relief. I was excited to head home and put this day behind me, but I was barely a block into my walk when my heart sank. There he was again, leaning against a lamppost as if he'd been waiting for me. Still staring, he moved behind me, blocking my path back to school. My stomach clenched. I put my head down and kept walking toward home. He began to follow. I sped up a little and he matched my pace. Panic surged through me and I broke into a sprint. I could hear his footsteps behind me, gaining ground. Come on," I whispered to myself, pushing my body to keep going. My lungs burned. There was no way I could keep up this pace all the way home. I spotted Melissa's house just up ahead. She was at field hockey practice, but maybe her parents were home. I prayed that they were. I ran faster, my heart pounding in my chest, desperate for safety. Reaching the porch, I fumbled with the doorknob. To my relief, the door was unlocked. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me and locking it just as I heard him reach the porch. I screamed as he pounded on the door, my body shaking from adrenaline and fear. "Annie?" "What's going on?" Melissa's dad asked as he rushed out of his home office, confusion etching his face. I was sobbing, trying to catch my breath as I pointed at the door. "There's a man. He chased me." My voice was hoarse with fear. Before I could explain further, the door shook again from another strike. "Stay here," Melissa's dad ordered. Anger flashed in his eyes and he yanked the door open. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled. The stranger's expression shifted from surprise to panic, realizing that I wasn't alone. Without a word, he bolted off the porch, disappearing down the street. Melissa's dad hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether to chase him down. Instead, he turned back to me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders to comfort me. I was a complete wreck. He called the police while I sobbed in his arms, trying to process what had just happened. When my parents arrived, they were frantic. I told them everything, still shaking. My mom hugged Melissa's dad, crying and thanking him. That night, the local news reported on the lockdown at my school, showing grainy security footage of the man trying to force his way in. My heart sank, but I honestly wasn't surprised that I recognized him. It was the same man who had chased me. From that day forward, I never walked to school again. My parents insisted on driving me, and they kept a close eye on me until I was old enough to drive myself. I never saw the man again, but he was never caught either. Even now, as I sit in the safety of my room, I can feel his eyes on me. I know he's out there somewhere, and the thought terrifies me. People say I need to move on and that I shouldn't live in fear. But I can't shake the feeling that he's still watching me.